It's no secret that Invincible is one of the biggest animated shows in modern times. The show has a lot going for it. The plot is subversive from what you'd typically expect from a superhero show, it's not afraid of touching on more mature themes, and it has a huge cast of characters. And as the online fandom will tell you, some are definitely better than others. So with that in mind, we created a list of every Invincible character from the show, not the comics, and ranked them from Z tier being the most likable and best designed characters to F tier being the most forgettable and trash characters. If you agree or disagree with anything on this tier list, be sure to come tell me live over at twitch.tv/Retrora. And now, let's get into it. Starting off strong, we have the biggest fraud in the entire show, the Immortal. I think most people will agree Immortal is like one of the most hated characters. He doesn't do anything, he's condescending, he's an asshole. Nobody likes him in the show and outside of the show as well. I would confidently put the Immortal into F tier for fraud. He's died I don't know how many times, but he will not stay dead. Need that to happen. Duplicate, you know, the Immortal's little side piece or whatever. Duplicate gets a lot of hate from people because she's also very condescending, very arrogant sometimes, which is okay. There's a lot of arrogant characters in the show, but for the amount that she actually does, I don't think it's warranted for her to be that way, which is why people, I think, call her annoying and call her all sorts of things. And she also says that she suffers a lot despite the fact that she never actually truly dies. Like, yes, she does feel all of the deaths from all of her duplicates, but at the same time, there are characters that are actually dying and are actually putting their lives on the line, whereas she always has her like zero copy that guarantees that no matter what happens to any duplicates that she makes, she'll always be fine. So she's always complaining when there's not really a need to be. I don't hate Duplicate as much as I hate the Immortal, but I'd put her in C tier and like low C tier, almost F. And before these clog up the entire tier list, let me get these out of the way now because there's so many of them. All variants of Mark. Viltrumite Mark for me is probably one of my favorite variants because it's a direct mirror up to what Invincible could have turned into. I would put this one up into S. The big goggle variant I don't like as much. I don't like the big spoon things on Invincible's eyes as is, and so making them bigger makes me kind of hate it. I would put this one into like C tier. The Phantom Mark variant I would put in B tier. I don't love it, I don't hate it. Prisoner Mark. Ugh. It kind of reminds me of Deadpool from that one X-Men movie where like Deadpool's not wearing the mask and he's got his mouth all shut. Very gross to look at. I would say like C tier. The Flaxen Mark variant, I like the suit that he's wearing when he's in this variant form. I'd put this one into A. Mustache Mark, kind of the same thing as Viltrumite Mark, but like a little bit older looking. I would also put this one into S tier. The Goggleless Mark variant, I actually do really like a lot. I think getting rid of the spoons is a good look, but I wouldn't quite put it up into S. I'd put it into A. Bulletproof Mark. Again, it's that big spoon look on the face. I already don't like it with Mark, and I definitely don't like it with Bulletproof either, but we'll get to that. I'd put this one into C tier. And then you have the Maskless Mark variant. I think this is like one of the better looking ones. I'd put this one up into A. The Omni Mark variant, I don't really like this one. I think Omni-Man pulls off his own look really well, and I think Mark kind of trying to emulate that in his own version just doesn't really work. I don't hate it though. I'd put it into B tier. Mohawk Mark, I don't love the way that this one looks, but this is one of the marks that gets a lot of screen time. I would put this one into A tier because we actually get a lot of characterization, and it's really interesting to see when the actual variant marks get to speak, how different they are and like the different things that they've gone through in their own worlds, which I always like. The Sinister version of Mark I think is probably one of my favorite ones that's in this entire tier list. I would put this one up into S. I actually like the yellow and black look more than his other suits that actual Mark has, but we'll get to those as well. Jacket Suit Mark I would put into A tier. I like the design despite him having the spoons on his face. The Mark 6 variant, I don't really love this one. I don't really like the thing on his face, and then he has the spoons on top of that. I think if the spoons like blended more with the cloth on his face, I think I'd like it a little bit more, but I don't really like this one. I'd put this one into C tier as well. Conquest. Now this character is sick. He's also voiced by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is the guy who plays Negan in The Walking Dead, and Invincible is played by Steven Yeun, who played Glenn, and if you've seen The Walking Dead, you know where I'm going with this. So it's really, really cool to see that they have like a little bit of a rematch, essentially, in Invincible, and I'll be real with you, I definitely think Conquest deserves Z tier. I think he's a pretty hyped up villain, but I think he fits the bill enough. You know, he's got that iconic line, you know, stand ready for my arrival, worm. It's just, oh, sick, dude. Amber Bennett. People really hate Amber Bennett, and I don't like disagree with people hating her. I think that there's a lot of characterization things that they do with her that are actually warranting of her being disliked by people. I think some people go a little too far with hating on Amber, but at the same time, I do kind of get it. I would put Amber in probably like C tier just because there are a lot of moments throughout the show where like their relationship feels really frustrating, but like it also makes sense. It's kind of having that like Spider-Man thing where Invincible has to choose between his like actual life and his superhero life, which I can appreciate, but I also just feel like a lot of the time when I'm watching the show, you very much just want to see the superhero stuff, but the entire point is to have that conflict. She's a product of that, so you can't totally hate on her for it, but a lot of the time I just find myself not caring about her subplot for the sole reason of I just don't feel like they have chemistry. Battle Beast, GOAT character, GOAT design. I feel like anytime that he's on screen, he kind of steals the show. Like whenever I see him on screen, I'm like, dude, all right, I'm in. You know what I'm saying? I want to see more. I'd put him up into Z tier. I think that's a Z tier character for sure. Powerplex. This is a wah. I hate Invincible. He killed my family. I really like Powerplex though because I like his suit. I like that he's voiced by Jesse Pinkman. And then you have Britt, who's voiced by Jonathan Banks, who plays Mike from Breaking Bad as well. It's just a nice little foil there. And honestly, I really enjoyed whenever Powerplex was on screen. I enjoyed his subplot, and I hope that he comes back. I haven't read the comics, so I don't know if he does, but I would put him up into S tier because I get it. I get what his motivations are. He is a little bit of a crybaby, but like you understand why, and his suit's cool and his powers are cool. I'd put him up into S. Britt. We don't really see a whole lot of Britt throughout the show, but I think I'd put him into B tier solidly because he's voiced by Jonathan Banks. Bug-Eye. We barely see this character. I don't even really know what they do, if I'm being real with you, because they're shown so little. I mean, I'd put them into B tier because I don't know what they do. Adam and Betsy Wickens. Hate these guys. Hate them so much. Adam Wickens, that's Adam Eve's dad, absolute fraud, put him into F tier. Betsy Wickens, I can at least put into C tier. She's a little nicer than the dad, but the dad is like actually like a prejudiced dickhead, and he's just like never seeing reason. He's always frustrating whenever he's on screen. I think throughout the entire show, there is not a single line that Eve's dad says that makes any sense or that I agree with at all. It's just the most like frustrating character to watch throughout the entirety of the runtime. Burley, again, not a character that we see very often. He tried out for the Guardians of the Globe like Bug-Eye and didn't get in. That's a B tier. I'm indifferent to him. Business Baby. This is a clear reference to Boss Baby, that DreamWorks movie, or like whoever made it. I would put this one into C tier, but because it kind of made me chuckle when I saw this character appear on screen, I'd put it into B tier. Rexplode. My GOAT! I'll be real, I didn't really like Rexplode at the beginning, but I think that's very intentional by the show writers. You're not supposed to like Rexplode, you know what I mean? He eventually grows and he develops and he's got good character development, and then he pulls a Vegeta by blowing himself up and sacrificing himself, which I don't really feel like he had to do. I mean, he was in like a really dire situation. He was gonna get killed and he took one out with him. I really wish he didn't die, but I also hope that they don't bring him back like they did when he got shot in the head. Rexplode though, for me, I would put him into S tier solidly. I don't know if anyone else thought this about Rexplode, but he kind of reminds me of like Sokka if we got to see Sokka become like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years older than he is in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Shrinking Ray, I put her into A tier solidly. I think she's got a fun character dynamic with Rexplode. We don't really see a whole lot of her. There's so many characters in this show that like a lot of people don't really get their time to shine, but I would put her solidly into A tier. William Clockwell. This is our Mark's best friend, and one of the variants of Mark actually mentioned that they miss William, which implies that maybe that variant of Mark and him had an intimate relationship, which is kind of interesting considering that Mark that we know is just best friends with him. It's really interesting, but I think William himself I would put into probably B tier. He's not like a crazy good character. He's not a bad character. He's just very midline. Like, he doesn't really do a whole lot, but he is a good comic relief every now and again, I will say. Cast Iron. There's not a whole lot that I can say about Cast Iron. I would put him into B tier. Dinosaurus. I personally don't know a lot about this character, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is a comic character, and they're not introduced yet into the actual show, but I think by design alone, I'd put it into A tier. Mr. Lou. I would put this character into A tier solidly because of their design when they turn into a dragon. dragon. Like, they're not really an important character, but they are kind of significant for like an episode, I guess. That little move that he does when he turns into a dragon, that is like one of the most saucy moves in the entire show. Deserves A tier for sure. Great Wall. This is just Mr. Lou's bodyguard. I would put him into B tier. Iguana. Iguana is part of the Lizard League, and I gotta be real, I think the Lizard League are like some of the most annoying characters throughout the entire thing. I'd put Iguana into like B tier though. Just, I don't really mind how they look, and I don't mind them as a character. They just don't really do a whole lot, but I don't hate them either. Zaim. This plot line where these guys are like searching for like the ancient being or whatever it is so annoying because it doesn't go anywhere, and it's the same thing with Jane and Riley. These characters like straight up feel like I don't care. You know what I mean? I just don't care. They'd go into F for me. Debbie Grayson. I would fight Omni-Man for Debbie Grayson. Z tier. Paul. This is the guy that Debbie dates after trying to like get back in the dating scene for a little bit. I actually like Paul a lot. Like, he's a very endearing character, dog. I'd put him in A. Kid Thor. This is a Marvel reference, and I actually want to talk about something real quick with Invincible that I really, really like. Invincible does the whole like anti-comic book hero thing, but in their own way. They still represent a lot of the characters that you see in like DC and Marvel, like with Kid Thor or Agent Spider or Darkwing. All of these characters are obviously references to other comic book media that we see, but they don't just make fun of them. Like, they use the stereotypes that those characters fall under, and then they actually use them as those stereotypes rather than just like pinning them up to make fun of them. A lot of like anti-comic book type of material, you usually don't see that. Like with The Boys, for example, you have Homelander who's like Superman, but like he's not Superman. Like, we're kind of making fun of Superman and like what he'd actually be. And like, that's fine for it being its own thing, but I can appreciate Invincible for not like following that same track. I'm not trying to shit on The Boys at all. I think that's a fine show, but like, this does something different, which I like a lot. Kid Thor, though, I'd probably put him up into A tier. Agent Spider. So I actually didn't know this until a friend of mine had pointed it out while I was watching the show, but apparently Agent Spider is actually a stand-in for the comic version of actual Spider-Man, because apparently Spider-Man actually appears in the Invincible comic. I still need to read the comic. It sounds really fun, but apparently this is actually supposed to be real Spider-Man, but due to rights issues with animation, they weren't able to actually include a variant of Spider-Man in here. For it being a clear allusion to Spider-Man, I'd put him up into S tier, because that's actually really cool if they did that. Professor Ock, same thing. They had to change the name for this, even though Doc Ock actually appears in the Invincible comic. I would put this one up into A tier. It's not as cool as Spider-Man appearing, but it's still a really, really cool reference. Kill Cannon. This is the first villain that's defeated by Invincible and Adam Eve. I believe this is technically Adam Eve's nemesis or something like that. I would put Kill Cannon with his design up into A. He is kind of cool because he's meant to be like a parody of Cyborg from the DC comics. I think other than that, he doesn't really stand out to me personally, but A tier I think is where I'd put him. Big Mildew. This is a character that dies alongside Business Baby. We don't really know a whole lot about them, but I mean, rest in peace, but I'd put you in C tier. Knockout. We don't really see a whole lot of Knockout, but if I'm not mistaken, she's also allied with Kid Thor. I don't really love her or don't hate her. I'd put her in B tier. Komodo Dragon. I gotta give Komodo Dragon his props. I actually think Komodo Dragon, even though I really don't care for the Lizard League that much, he does kick Duplicate's ass, and I gotta give him his props for that. Get up into A tier, you crazy bastard. Cecil Stedman. A lot of people like to hate on Cecil. A lot of people also like to say Cecil's right, and that Invincible should just listen to him. The debate around Cecil being right or wrong is actually really good discourse, showing that Cecil is a well-written character. If people are like, what do I think about Cecil? It's very clearly intentionally written that way, and I can really, really appreciate that. I would put Cecil up into Z tier, actually, for being such an important character and being very well written. Two Punch Man. A little reference to One Punch Man. I gotta be real. Goated reference. Put it up into A. Kursk. This is a guy that's taken out by Red Rush and then ends up working for Machine Head later on. Honestly, not a whole lot to say about him. He's got electric powers, but I still think Powerplex is a better electric kind of character. I would put him into B tier. Not really a memorable character, but I don't hate him. Best Tiger. I actually really like this character's design. When I first saw them, I thought they were a Mark variant, but then I also started thinking they also kind of look like Solid Snake. I don't know if that's intentional or not. I haven't looked into it far enough to know. I think as far as design goes, I think he's kind of sauced. I'd put him up into A. Kyle. This is Amber's boyfriend boyfriend. Don't know anything about him. He shares some interest with Mark, which is kind of cool. I'd put him into B tier. Olga. This is Red Rush's wife. She's now widowed, unfortunately, after Red Rush is killed by Omni-Man. Really don't have a whole lot of development with her, but she does have some conversations with Debbie every now and again, which I can kind of like. I'd put her in B tier, though. Not a super important character, given the grand scope of everything. Omnipotus. This is a character that appears when Mark is off-world, and everybody's trying to deal with him at the same time. I think he's kind of cool with his design, but he really doesn't do a whole lot, if I'm being real. I do like the way that he looks, but I don't think I can put him any higher than A tier, given how little we really see of him. Pangea. We know nothing about this character at all. Like, they were very briefly in the show for like 2 seconds. I'd put them in like C tier. I can't even say I'm midline to them because I just straight up don't know anything about them. Director Erickson. The story with Director Erickson and Brandyworth and Polly. They're the people who helped create Adam Eve. We all fucking hate Director Erickson, all right? We don't fuck with him here. F tier character, dude. Get him out of my face. Dr. Brandyworth, on the other hand, I feel a little more sympathy for. He doesn't really seem like a negative character or like a malicious character, but he does like inadvertently help with, I don't know, Polly kind of dying and like the entire situation. Like, it's not his fault. I would put him into B tier, not because we don't know enough about him, but because I don't think I could say he's good or bad. I think B is about where he'd fit. Polly. This is Adam Eve's biological mother who dies in the Adam Eve special. I would put her into high A tier for giving us some really good backstory on where Adam Eve comes from, why she's so powerful, like the entire history of all of that. Really good character. She's a really sweet character too. I'd put her A tier. Monster Girl. I'm pretty sure Monster Girl is voiced by the same person who does Azula in Avatar: The Last Airbender, which always like subliminally made me think higher of the character because Azula is so well written. But I think Monster Girl also is a very interesting character. She like age regresses every single time that she transforms, and that's like a big thing, a big plot point for Rudy / Robot. But I also think that she's a very good character on her own. I would say she's probably like an A tier character. I don't feel like I ever get annoyed watching her on screen, whereas with Rudy and Robot, dude, yes, I get annoyed all the time because this character is so annoying sometimes, man. I think Rudy means well a lot of the time, but I think Rudy on his own, when he's not in his suit, I would put B tier. Robot himself, I would put like higher A tier because we actually see Robot have a little bit of sauce when he's not being an annoying little kid. Sometimes the character can just get a little annoying sometimes, dude. Like, stop yapping my ear off and let me see some shit. Radcliffe. This is Cecil's former superior. I think it's cool seeing Cecil's backstory like we did. I would put this character probably low A tier just for the fact that like he mentors Cecil and kind of even gets like his own scar like Cecil has. Overall, solid character. Donald Ferguson. I think we all kind of thought that this looked like Bobby Hill when we first watched Invincible. Maybe you thought that when you read the comic or something. Maybe he doesn't look like that as much in the comics. But I would say, as far as his character goes, though, I actually do like this character more than I thought I would when I initially saw him. I would put Donald Ferguson up into S tier, man. He's got some sauce moments himself, and he's got some good character development as time goes on. Reanimen. Probably just a B tier for me. These guys are just like kind of the generic soldier guy that basically every story has at some point. Rick Sheridan. This is William's boyfriend when he goes to university. He's, I think, killed and then brought back as like an exoskeleton, or I forgot what it's called, that they remake people into. The same thing happened with Donald as well. As far as his story goes, his plot doesn't really develop further than having been resurrected after getting blown up, but I would put him into like a solid B tier, high B tier. He's an interesting type of character, but not anything super wild. Tech Jacket. I think this is one of the best designs in the entire show, for sure, dude. It's not like overdone. It feels subtle enough, but it also has that sauce. It's got like the little laser coming out of his eye. He fights the mustache mark that I was glazing earlier. I think Tech Jacket, based purely on design and sauce, I would put him up into S. It's just a sick design, man. Seance Dog. This is the guy that Nualzat, or however you say his name, he's like the big ant alien guy or praying mantis alien guy. He comes to Mark saying, you know, we need help. He disguises himself as Seance Dog to approach Mark, and that's really it. We don't really know a whole lot about Seance Dog other than it being a thing that Mark reads about in comics. Like, it's a comic character in his universe. I'd personally put Seance Dog into A tier. It's a cool little world building moment. to have something from the comic that Mark is reading come to life actually. Nuolzot. I actually don't remember how you pronounce this guy's name, but he's the shapeshifter that turns into Seance Dog. As far as him on his own, he kind of deceives Mark by having him come and help the planet that they're on. I believe it's called Thraxon. In reality, Omni-Man just wanted to speak to Mark. He's a little deceptive, but I mean, that's really all he does as far as his character goes. I'd put him into B tier because he's just a very neutral character. Andressa. This is Omni-Man's wife on Thraxon. They have a kid together, which ends up being Oliver. Andressa herself as a character does kind of plead to Mark and like get him to see the light on Omni-Man. She's a decent character, but I don't think I could rank her any higher than like A tier. I think she's an okay character and she's definitely important, but I don't think she goes any higher than that. Oliver Grayson. I hate this kid so much. He's like the classic kid character trope where like the kid is either too far good or too far bad. Like when Invincible's about to kill Angstrom Levy, he's holding him up and he's about to kill him and Oliver comes over and is like, yeah, do it. And Invincible obviously can't in front of Oliver because he doesn't want to set that example. And I just hate that trope so much because it happens in so many different types of media. I personally hate Oliver myself and I don't know why they let him have the Omni-Man logo on Earth considering everything that Omni-Man did. That always made no sense to me. But if I had to actually rank him, I can't quite put him into F tier. I think the highest I could give him is like a high C tier. Anytime that he's on the screen, you know that the plot's gonna get derailed in some way or another, and it's so frustrating to watch. The Sequids. These aren't really characters. They're just kind of an antagonist that are like a hive mind kind of thing. I would put these into B tier. Watching the fight with them was actually a really interesting one throughout the show. Supreme Lizard. I hate the Lizard League, dude. And I think this costume is so over the top, and it's meant to be intentionally goofy, but I just hate the group and I hate everything about the Lizard League. I would put them into F tier just because the suit is dumb and I hate the Lizard League. It's just the worst of both worlds, all right? Bolt. I don't really know anything about this character, and I looked him up just to make sure that I wasn't bugging. There's like no information on this guy when I looked him up. I don't know if there's more that I'm missing or like he's some secret crazy character that I don't know about. But as far as where I'd rank him, I gotta throw him in C tier because I literally know nothing about the character. The Mauler Twins. Some of the best moments in the entire show come from the Mauler Twins, dude. I gotta be real. They are carrying heavily in some episodes, in the earlier seasons especially too. I love whenever these guys are on screen. I would throw them into Z tier 100%, dude. Alan the Alien, another GOAT back to back. I gotta say, Alan the Alien, whenever he's on screen, it's always like a good time. He's a comic relief character, but he's also very plot relevant, which I can appreciate. And he's got some cool abilities as well, like being able to communicate telepathically. I would put Alan into Z tier. It's always a good time when he's on screen, and I love the content that we get with him. Tether Tyrant. I don't really love or hate this guy. I'd probably put him into like low B tier. Thetis. This is the guy who rules over the coalition of planets. He's secretly a Viltrumite that's like rebelling against them. I think it's really funny when he introduces himself as a Viltrumite to Alan, I'm pretty sure. He rips off his beard to show that he's got the mustache, which was really just unnecessary because he could have just been like, hey, I'm a Viltrumite. But he was like, no, I gotta rip off the beard to show you. I think he's a cool character. He's voiced by Optimus Prime. We haven't seen him do a whole lot yet, but I think he's got some cool potential for future stuff. I'll put him up into A tier for now. Maybe later on we'll see more of him in action. Doc Seismic. I don't know what Krillin has been smoking on, dude, but get into C tier. The Hunk. This is one of those characters that's killed in the Invincible War by one of the variant marks. We don't see a whole lot of them, and they're clearly inspired by like the Marvel Hulk, so not really anything crazy, but kind of a cool reference. I would probably just put him in B tier as well. Angstrom Levy. I actually really like Angstrom Levy. I think Angstrom's entire vendetta against Invincible is a little weird considering that it was Angstrom's fault that all the people that he initially killed were because of his own hand and not Invincible's. But I do think his powers and abilities are really, really sick, and because of him we get all the variant marks, which really, really does bring the story to a new height. And because of that, I would put Angstrom Levy into S tier for sure. He's a very, very interesting villain. Thrag. This character, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe is the strongest Viltrumite. I think he's the Grand Regent is what it's called of the Viltrumites. He kind of looks like Omni-Man, but like on hella more steroids than Omni-Man already takes. I like this character design. I don't know a lot about the character, but I do think that he's gonna shape up to be like a primary antagonist at some point. I would probably put Thrag based on design and potential alone into S tier. But who knows? Maybe they get soloed immediately when they get introduced. I don't know. Wolfman. This is the character that fights Viltrum Invincible during the Invincible War. I think he ends up losing thing, but his character design's kind of cool. I think his comic variant is a little bit better. Overall, I would probably put Wolfman into high B tier. He doesn't get the job done quite, and he's not as cool as Battle Beast, which is also kind of a wolf-type character, but I still kind of like him. I'd put him in high B tier. Aquarius. This is one of the Guardians of the Globe. He's like Aquaman, but like harder to look at and probably a little bit more useless. I'd say C tier on Aquarius. King Lizard. This is the guy who shoots Rexplode, and then somehow Rexplode survives. I honestly, like I said, I hate the Lizard League, but I think this guy gets his licks in with Rexplode. He gets his moments. I don't love him, but at the same time, he does get the job done and what he's trying to get done. I would say he's high B tier and probably like the highest rated Lizard League member that I could give. Martian Man. This is one of the other Guardians of the Globe that's killed by Omni-Man as well. I forgot to mention that Aquarius also was killed, and I was very thankful in that first episode when Omni-Man did that. Martian Man's main power is shapeshifting, which I think is really cool. Like, it's inevitable that one of these characters had to have that. But I'd put Martian Man up into like A tier. I like his design, and I like that he can shapeshift. I think that's a really cool ability. Shapesmith. This is another Martian that takes over an astronaut's body, which I think was kind of an interesting story, but Shapesmith himself, though, is a little annoying. He's also voiced by the same guy who does the voice for Sonic in the Sonic movies. As far as where I'd rank him, I think Shapesmith, for me, is like a low B tier character. I think he's got a few moments that I like, but overall, I don't think I'd rate him higher than that. Biplane. This is kind of like a Vulture type character. I put him in C tier. Queen Lizard. I still don't like the Lizard League characters. B tier. Red Rush. This character's kind of like the Flash of this universe. He ends up getting killed by Omni-Man. He's also part of the Guardians of the Globe. I think Red Rush's death is probably the most memorable out of all of the Guardians of the Globe. Like, he gets his head crushed and squished by Omni-Man, and I think he's the first. I think for having a memorable death and because of his abilities and the way that you see him use them, I actually would put Red Rush into S. War Woman. This is another one of the Guardians of the Globe. She ends up getting killed by Omni-Man as well. We don't really get to see a whole lot from her outside of the first episode, but I would put her into A tier. Salamander. This is the guy that fights Shrink Ray during the fight with the entire Lizard League. I hate the Lizard League, and a salamander technically isn't even a lizard. I'd put him into C tier. Multi-Paul. He's not as frustrating to watch as Duplicate. This is her brother, but I do think they're kinda even overall, given like we don't see as much of Multi-Paul. I would say Multi-Paul is a little bit better than Duplicate, but not by much. They both go in C tier. Denise, alternate universe Donald. I would put this variant up into like high B tier. Pretty cool to see that though. Force Fist and Knuckle Buster. These are the two people who are responsible for the scar that you see on Cecil's face. They have this plan way before Invincible's time where they're gonna like release this deadly gas on everybody else. Cecil ends up stopping it and then he's like mutilated. They don't get away with it, they die, but they do leave a lasting impression on the series as they end up getting Cecil sent to prison. They are very interesting characters that drive the plot forward. I would put them into A tier despite them kind of only being minor characters. Furnace. This is a character that works for Machine Head. Kind of a forgettable character overall. I kind of forgot this character even existed before I made this tier list, so I'd put him in B tier. Green Ghost, both variants. You have the Green Ghost that's in the comics, and you have the Green Ghost that's in the actual show. One is a man, one is a woman. It's not really a huge difference to me. They both are able to go invisible, and they have the ability of flight and some other ones. They're Guardians of the Globe members. I would put Green Ghost into A tier, even though we don't really get to see a whole lot of them. Adam Eve, a goated character. I think she's super well written. I don't think I can put her anywhere below Z. Her personality is very defined. She's got a good set of powers. She works really well with Mark, and you actually feel their chemistry, unlike Amber. I think overall, amazing character. Angstrom Jr. It's just Angstrom Levy's kid. I would put him into like C tier. Caitlin, alternate universe Cecil. Again, same thing as Donald. I would put this version of Cecil into B tier. D.A. Sinclair. This is the guy that makes the anime on the request of Cecil to help make a force that could defeat Omni-Man. They don't originally, and then I think he still works for Cecil after a certain period of time. He's a little weird. He's like a mad genius kind of character archetype. He kind of reminds me of like Kimberly from Fullmetal Alchemist, but just by design. I would say he's like a high A tier character. Isotope, a little bit of a minor antagonist. I think he deserves to be in like high B tier, but I really don't have a whole lot to say about him. He works with Machine Head, or at least he did, and that's really all there is to say. Magmaniac. He works under Isotope, but he's not a super memorable character. I would also say that he's like a B tier character. He works with the tether guy at some point, which I also put in B tier, so it only makes sense. Mr. Sayer. This is a guy that manages the burger mart that Mark works at in season 1. I'm not an interesting character at all. I'm C tier. Octoboss. This is a character that Rexplode fights, and Octoboss is really just kind of a minor antagonist overall. Really not someone that's crucial to the story, but still kind of a cool character. I think by design, I would put them into A tier. Darkwing OG and Darkwing 2. I like the original Darkwing, but we don't see a whole lot from them. I would put them into A tier. Darkwing 2, even though he's kind of like a fanboy version of Darkwing, I would put him into S because we actually get to see his abilities in use, and he actually is kind of a little relevant. He also just kind of is a cool character overall, which is why I put him in S. Fightmaster and Dropkick. We don't really see a whole lot from these guys, but I'd put them into like B tier. They're like guys from the future, but that's really all we know, and it's kind of interesting, but also a little bit forgettable because I didn't even remember these guys were on the list. Giant. This is about as generic as you could possibly get with a villain. It's meant to be like an 8-year-old kid that somehow got turned into a giant. It's also like a recurring character throughout the series at points. I would solidly put Giant into like B tier. Midway B tier because it's just such a generic type of villain. Machine Head. Every time this character came on the screen, I got so sick and tired of their auto-tuned voice, dude. Their design is interesting, but God, their voice got annoying. I would put Machine Head into A tier, but honestly, I think Machine Head gets bumped down into B because their voice pissed me off so much. Doug Cheston. He gets turned into a Reaniman by D.A. Sinclair, and then later decides to no longer live because he is so horrified with what he's been turned into. Kind of an interesting plot for this little side character, but I would put him into A tier because of it. Gretchen and Jessica Duvall. These are family members of Powerplex, and they end up dying because of the fight between Invincible and Omni-Man. They get caught up in it, and Invincible's not able to save them, and so Powerplex is entirely consumed by rage because Invincible let this happen. We don't see a whole lot from them overall. We don't really connect with them as people as far as watchers go. I would say them being the motivation for Powerplex is kind of interesting, so I'd put them into B tier. Becky and Jack Duvall. This is Powerplex's immediate family. Becky is his wife, and Jack Duvall is his son. His wife encourages him to go after Invincible, which I always thought was a little dumb. I would put Becky probably into like C tier for encouraging Powerplex's bad behavior, and Jack Duvall, it's just a little kid. Just put him in B tier. I have sympathy for these two characters a little bit more because they get fried because of Powerplex, and it's really tragic, and that's why I don't rank them a little bit lower than I usually would. Lucan. I had no idea Steve Harvey was a Viltrumite. This is also the first Viltrumite that Mark meets outside of his family. Design-wise, and from what we actually see, I would put him into A tier. Black Samson. This is one of the original members of the Guardians of the Globe. He ends up losing his powers at some point, but then comes back. Black Samson's a really interesting character given that he's not one of the people killed by Omni-Man, but still is around post Omni-Man leaving. I'd put Black Samson into like very, very high A tier. The Elephant, a minor antagonist throughout the series. Omni-Man usually wouldn't want to deal with him, so he sends Invincible to go fight him and train on him. Honestly, a very forgettable character. I forgot this character even existed outside of this tier list. Art Rosenbaum, GOAT. He makes all of the suits, and he does a fantastic job at it. I like this character a lot. He's also voiced by Mark Hamill, who is Luke Skywalker. I'd put Art up very high in A tier. Damien Darkblood, really cool character, voiced by Mr. Krabs, but really doesn't do anything, if I'm being really honest with you. I really wish he would do more. I thought that he would. It seemed like this character would be a lot more important when he's first introduced, but I can't put him any higher than B tier. He'd be like the highest B tier character, though. General Telia. She's a high-ranking member of the Coalition of Planets. She's really not that crazy of a character as far as relevance goes. I'm pretty sure it's implied that she's Alan's girlfriend, if I'm not mistaken. I would put her into like high B tier as well, next to Damien Darkblood, because she's cool, but we don't see a whole lot from her. Queen Aquaria. I already don't like looking at the other version of Aquarius. I'm putting this one even lower in C tier. Titan. I like Titan. I think he's a really underrated character throughout the entire show. I personally would put Titan high A tier. I like seeing him throughout the show. He's a fun character to watch. Anissa. She's a Viltrumite that comes to Earth, and she tries to explain to Mark that like Earth being taken over by the Viltrumites is a good thing, just like every other Viltrumite thinks, because like everybody thinks that their cause is the right one, right? They fight, and she's an interesting character. I would actually put her up into S tier. She's a very solid villain. Like, she feels like she's not just evil to be evil. It feels like there's more layers to her. Bulletproof. This is kind of like Diet Invincible, but like not as cool, and his suit sucks a little bit more, and he's still got the spoon eyes like I was criticizing earlier in this video. I still think Bulletproof is kind of a cool guy. Like, he does have a couple moments every now and again, and he seems like a pretty grounded character overall. Like, he's not obnoxious or cocky or arrogant, so I'd put him up into A tier. General Craig, another Viltrumite, but another really well-written Viltrumite that's not just like one-dimensional. It feels like he's got a couple layers to him as well. I would put him up into S tier as well. Omni-Man, of course. Where else do you put Omni-Man? You love him, you hate him, you get all of the emotions with Omni-Man. I would put him up into Z tier for sure. I think Omni-Man's a good portrayal of like the opposite of what Superman is meant to be. It doesn't feel like it's intentionally trying to be an exact mirror opposite of what Superman's trying to be, but it feels like an anti-hero going in its own unique direction without it feeling like it's treading the same kind of ground we've seen with that trope before. Thick Omni-Man, of course. You gotta put that one up in Z tier as well. Mark Grayson and... Obviously, these are the same characters, but I'm going to rank each individually because they have different portrayals given what their scenario is. Mark Grayson, I definitely think, is a solidly written foil to the actual superhero counterpart. I would put him up into S tier, of course, because he's the main character. Where else are you going to put him? Invincible, of course, I'm not going to put any lower than Z tier. I mean, it's the titular name title character. It goes in Z tier, and you guys all saw that coming immediately when you clicked on this video. There's no other place to put Invincible other than Z tier. I will say, however, I do like Invincible's blue suit more than I like his original suit. I just really do wish he got rid of the spoon eyes. With that being said, Invincible in the blue suit goes into Z tier as well, but I would put it a little bit higher than his original suit. One thing I will say about Invincible as a character is that I absolutely love the way that Steven Yeun portrays Invincible. I believe it the entire time. I'm never once knocked out of my immersion with the show, and there's really not an actor in the show that makes me break immersion at all. The voice acting cast in this show is absolutely stacked, which is why the animation looks like it does, but that's another conversation for another time. And finally, we have the narrator. The narrator kicks in every now and again to, like, you know, give characters their intimate moments or to like fill in a couple gaps. It's not super overdone, but of course, you can't rate the narrator any lower than Z tier as well. And so of course, it goes up into the highest tier. And now, with that being said, that is my complete Invincible characters tier list from up to season 3. We obviously did not include any comic characters because, I mean, I haven't read the comics. I don't want to get spoiled. But if you guys want to talk about the comics in the comments down below, if you want to give your theories on what you think might happen if you don't know, if you want to talk about where you think I was wrong or right with where I rank things, be sure to drop a like, and I will see you in the next video. Let me know your thoughts, and bye-bye.